Welcome to the Solar Rights Alliance podcast, your frontline resource for defending the freedom and independence of rooftop solar. I'm Dave Rosenfeld.
And I'm Cailey Underhill, and we're here to give you the tools and information to fight back and defend rooftop solar in California.
All right, well, let's get into it. Cailey, what is the latest in rooftop solar?
Well, as usual, Dave, there's quite a lot going on when it comes to rooftop solar over the course of the past several weeks. The big news today is about AB 942. This is the bill that would break 2 million rooftop solar contracts, which has been authored by Assemblymember Lisa Calderon. And just in case folks aren't aware, Assemblymember Calderon worked for SoCal Edison as an executive for 25 years before becoming an assembly member. So this is a bill that will attack consumers, constituents in her own district to enrich her former employer, SoCal Edison. And leading up to the first hearing that this bill got in the Assembly Utilities and Energy Committee, there was a huge outcry statewide over the fact that this bill will break 2 million rooftop solar contracts, renege on long-standing agreements with the state. So this went all abuzz on social media. People marched, they protested, they called their legislators, they wrote their legislators. There was even a protest outside of Assemblymember Calderon's office in which people literally blew the whistle on this bill, just calling foul on the Assemblymember using her position to attack consumers to enrich her former employer, Edison.
And all this grassroots pressure and public backlash and all of that did force the utilities to change their strategy at least a little bit. Is that correct?
That's correct. So when the bill came up for a vote in the Assembly Utility and Energy Committee, it did pass out of that committee, but with some significant amendments. Now, we want to be really clear. These amendments are in no way a compromise. This bill still breaks 2 million rooftop solar contracts, but it is significant that it was amended in that process, and that is a direct result of the actions that folks have taken to date to try to stop this very bad bill.
And the operative word here is that the amended bill still breaks 2 million solar contracts, right?
That is exactly right, Dave. And in the hearing, this assembly hearing in the Utilities and Energy Committee, the utilities tried to make the claim that there is no such thing as the rooftop solar contract. And I have bad news for them because I am holding that contract right now, holding it up to the camera so that folks can see this thing. It is in my hot little hands. This is called the Interconnection Agreement, and it is a contract that the solar user signs with the utility and with the state of California. And in it, it outlines the rules for how the rooftop solar program gets to be on the net metering program that it's on. And the rules are called the schedule. And so this document that I'm holding up to the camera right now is the schedule for these programs, the rules for how long a rooftop solar system gets to stay on its net metering program. And right here, Dave, on page 32 and 33, it outlines in no uncertain terms what this contract states, which is the following. These rooftop solar systems will continue receiving service on this schedule for a period of 20 years from the original year in which their system was interconnected to the grid. And on the very next page, it says explicitly that these rooftop solar systems are eligible for this 20-year period and shall not lose their eligibility if it is transferred to a new owner, operator, or account, meaning that these systems get to stay on this program for 20 years, even if the home is sold. And this is the part of the contract that AB 942 would break. And it is a contract, folks.
It's 100% a contract. And what's really crazy to me is for anyone that's not familiar with this, who didn't sign one of these, if you were a NEM1 or a NEM2 customer, you signed one of these, you know that, is this is not just fine print. This is something that is well understood in a number of different ways. Most solar consumers have the experience of sitting in their kitchen or somewhere with the solar company and asking what happens if I sell my home. And they tell you that the state is going to guarantee, you're going to sign a contract with the state that guarantees that this system will stay on net metering the whole time, which is very important because many of us take out 20-year loans and leases to pay for this thing, and we want to be sure that the buyer is going to be willing to take on that loan or lease. Mm-hmm. Also, it is the case that the CPUC itself has what they call a consumer protection guide. It's kind of hilarious that they call it that, but the law requires consumers to initial every page of the Consumer Protection Guide. And in that, this is the CPUC's own language, they call the 20-year guarantee literally a guarantee. That's
a guarantee.
That is
the exact word that is in this document. That's right.
So it is like, on what planet are we living on that the powers that be, including the very government that requires consumers to sign these contracts, is now claiming that it's not a contract? I mean, it really is just a breathtaking situation. And the bottom line is that this is really, really bad. But it's not just that it's breaking a contract, right? It's that if this bill, as amended, gets into law, it's going to have very real and bad consequences for many consumers. Is that correct?
That's correct. So this bill is frankly just a disaster from a consumer protection vantage point, because when you have someone who tries to go to sell their home, especially if they had a loan or a lease to get those solar panels, those loans or leases are priced for the 20-year guarantee that the state has guaranteed. And those loans and leases will be immediately underwater. And that means that in the process of trying to sell that home with rooftop solar, that seller is going to be out $10,000, $20,000, $30,000, the cost, whatever remains of the cost of that system when they're trying to sell that home. So this is a complete disaster from a consumer rights vantage point, for sure.
What's really also so disconcerting about this bill is that it fails to acknowledge that most people who have solar are middle and working class people who have worked really, really hard to try to get that solar on their roof so that they can save money and all the other reasons. And in the hearing, as I recall, some legislators did seem to acknowledge that. Is that right?
Yes, in that hearing, we had several Assembly members, including Assemblymember Patterson and Assemblymember Schiavo in particular, pushing back on this utility lie that rooftop solar users are all rich white people who live on the coast, which is simply not supported by the data. 60% of solar users are middle and working class, 53% are people of color. These are everyday folks all over the state of California.
Right. And we should just watch that clip right now just so that people can see some of the great things that they were saying. So why don't we just roll the tape?
I have, in my district, gotten more opposition to this bill than any other bill by 8 or 10-fold. I have not heard from one constituent supporting. How do we really make sure that we are able to approach this in a way that truly brings down the cost for people? Solar certainly has been a part of that. My mom, who is now a widow from an IBW Local 6 member, has solar on her home that she relies on. One of my staff, her mom is a retired teacher. She relies on that solar. And a third of the people who have solar in my district are also on the CARE plan. And so I have to push back a little bit on the narrative around these are all high-income people who, are cost shifting to lower income folks, because people are figuring out and scraping together and trying to figure out ways to keep their costs down through solar. And this is one of the ways that they're doing it.
I've received 500 emails on this, hundreds more calls. I think I have one of the highest densities of solar customers in PG&E's territory, if not the highest. And so I too, my assembly member, my friend over here, would also push back a little bit on that. It is kind of rich and wealthy people, renters in my district, because all the houses are new, have solar. And this state can't build anything, at a reasonable price. And so if all of a sudden people aren't incentivized to put solar, what does that require of an investment from the state, whether it's public financing or private financing, to build other stuff, right?
It's really great to see elected officials listening to their constituents. These are the good ones who we just saw. And I'll note, one of them is a Democrat and one of them is a Republican. That shows that actually doing your job as an elected official can be a bipartisan thing if you bother to actually listen to the constituents who are calling you and asking you to do it. And I really like how Assembly members Schiavo and Patterson note that, these are everyday people who scrimped and saved to put that solar on the roof. And we talk to people like that every single day, right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, I was just talking with someone the other day who said that they didn't take out a loan or a lease to get their system, but that was specifically because they had scrimped and saved to be able to purchase the system outright so that they could avoid the interest payments that come with the loan or the lease that then make the system more expensive over time. And this woman is a teacher. Like, we're not talking somebody who's making bank. For those of you who don't know, I used to be a high school English teacher, okay? We're not in like the upper classes here. Like, we're talking folks who are just scraping by, especially in the state of California. So they saved and they saved and they saved to be able to get this solar system on their roof. She was telling me about how her daughter, who's 28, lives with them because the cost of living is just so expensive in the state of California, and that if they had to sell their home, they would have to take out of the property value of the home the rooftop solar system if this contract is broken, because they wouldn't be able to include that the current value of the solar system in the sale of the home, because that value is lost if this contract is broken when the home is sold. So we hear stories like this all the time.
Right. Yeah, just in the last couple of days, right, I've talked to Jane from La Mesa. She invested in solar because she heard the state asking her to reduce her footprint on the grid, right? So she invested in other things too. Not a lot of money, but felt like it was the right thing to do. So she took out a HELOC loan, a 20-year loan, to pay for the solar. And if this bill becomes law and she tries to sell her home, she's going to have to pay that off and take a loss. And the lawmakers that are supporting this bill are completely tone deaf to everyday people. So that's the bad news. But it is also the case, Cailey, that the bill passed the Assembly Utilities and Energy Committee. It was a squeaker, wasn't it?
It was a squeaker. And, real kudos out there to everybody who called their legislators, wrote to their legislators, marched and protested, because it definitely had an impact. We had lots of legislators, as you saw in the clip, mentioning that they'd gotten more calls on this bill than any other. And as a result, although the bill passed the committee, it did so by a vote of 10-8. So we had 8 legislators who either voted no on the bill or who denied the bill a vote that it needed to pass, which is a big deal. So the fact that we had enough legislators to make it a squeaker is significant. And now the bill heads to the Appropriations Committee, and if it passes that committee, it'll head onto the full floor of the Assembly. So this is an important moment to be calling your legislators, especially on the Assembly side, and asking them to vote no on the amended version of AB 942. And even if you've called your legislator before that prior vote and they said, oh yeah, I'm against the bill, just make sure you call again, because with this amended version, we have legislators thinking this is some kind of a good compromise, and it is not. So legislators need to understand that this bill, in no uncertain terms, still breaks the rooftop solar contract and really screws over folks who are trying to sell their home, who will lose out on thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars in their investment if this bill becomes law.
Well, the take home definitely I'm hearing is we got to still fight this. We have a chance of defeating it, a very good chance, but we're going to have to keep it up. Legislators are hearing us. Let's turn up the pressure a lot more, and let's keep turning up the pressure until it's defeated. We're going to probably repeat that a couple more times on this podcast before we're done, but I think it's time for our next guest. Is that right?
Yep. So rooftop solar users are really making an impact out there. And again, the bill is moving forward. So we have a guest here today who's going to help us unpack how the utilities have abused their power for years and years and years in Sacramento, and how consumers can fight back on this bill and on others where consumer rights are at issue. Our next guest, he has been named by Capital Weekly as one of the top 100 movers and shakers in California. And as the president of the nonprofit group Consumer Watchdog, Jamie Court leads a big organization working on behalf of California consumers to put them at the center of the economy and make sure that they get a good deal. Jamie, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Pleasure to be with you.
Well, we are excited to have you here. And so maybe just to start things off, can you tell us a little bit about Consumer Watchdog and how you got started as a consumer advocate?
Well, I was in college and I was paying outrageous rates for my auto insurance. And there was an initiative on the ballot, Prop 103, to lower my auto insurance and prevent me from paying so much because of the zip code I lived in, which is why they were charging me so much. And it passed, and that got me caught the bug. It was Prop 103. And 37 years later, 37 years, it saved consumers literally, I think the last count was $150 billion, and that was a few years ago, on their auto insurance bills alone. So we've been doing that for a lot of years. That got me into this, and then I did some other things over the years. Was community organizer, homeless advocate. But 1994, I rejoined the guy who wrote Prop 103, a guy named Harvey Rosenfeld, and we built up what is now Consumer Watchdog. And our motto is expose, confront, change. And it's fun and it's great, but it's always the same battle with the same people. But I'm glad to be working with you. You're a great ally and you do great work. I love the fact that you take people to the PUC. You hold the PUC accountable. You hold the utilities accountable. There's no one really doing that, bringing people on the streets to the PUC. But there's still a lot of corruption, and it's good that you guys are out there shining a light on it. I'm really happy that you're there.
Well, right back at you, Jamie. We're so grateful that we get to work with you on issues like this. And, the LA Times called you a tireless consumer advocate, and boy, is that true. I'm so glad that you're out there on the watch for all of us. And as you said, you've been at this for quite some time, especially with the monopoly utilities and the CPUC. So I was wondering if you could tell our listeners just a little bit more about what's going on with the monopoly utilities in California. Why are they trying so hard to kill rooftop solar, to attack consumers? What's the landscape here?
I mean, it's interesting. They're a monopoly by design.
Right.
And that's what's so weird, right? So we give them a fair rate of return because they're a monopoly, but their rate of return is a lot more than fair. It's like 12%, and they have a monopoly. So it's crazy, and it's been going on forever. And we give them 12% on everything. Everything they build, everything they do, every time they put up a pole that's fire retardant, it's 12%. So they're making a ton of money, more than almost anyone on Wall Street these days, because Wall Street's so down. And it's always been like that. And unfortunately, PG&E, Edison, San Diego Gas and Electric, they have these revolving doors with the Public Utilities Commission. We have Carla Peterman, who was a PUC commissioner a few years ago, vice president at PG&E. It's insane. And you wonder why PG&E's got some of the highest rates. That's the way it works. And everyone who's there knows that could be their next job. And so it's horrible. And the governor's office is complicit with it. The governor has real close ties to PG&E. I mean, he did try to hold their feet to the fire after the wildfires in 17 and 18, but wound up really bailing them out, made the shareholders partially responsible, but also ratepayers responsible. And he talked tough, but overall, the monopoly utilities dominate the policy making in the state. It is like one big establishment, and they're all they're all connected, and then there's this revolving door, and that's how it works. Unfortunately, the guy who's the head of CAISO, Elliot Mainzer, was an Enron trader from 1998 to 2001, if you can believe that. He wasn't convicted, but he was an Enron trader, and he sat 20 feet away from all these people who went to jail. And I know that because Bob McCullough investigated him when this guy was up for a job at the Bonneville Power Authority, and he said, I caught him in all these trades, no crooked trades, but he was sitting right next to all these people making these trades, and he had to know. I mean, it's no evidence, but you're there. So that's who's running our electric grid. That's who's directing the future of the electric grid.
I want to talk a little bit about the revolving door and the corruption a little bit. A lot of people ask me, sometimes people in California and often out of California, well, now wait a minute, how is this possible? You have this Democratic governor and a Democratic controlled, and so people kind of assume why, how? And if you're Republican, you kind of go, well, of course. But if you're a Democrat, you're thinking how? And we've seen how PG&E's labor union, and in Democratic politics, labor unions are very powerful. PG&E's labor union has really been the attack dog on many of the things you're talking about, and not the least of which is the attack on rooftop solar. And Consumer Watchdog just did an expose on the lobbyists for PG&E's labor union, and I thought it was very interesting. And so can you talk a little bit about their lobbyist and how he uses his power to give PG&E what they want?
Well, it's called Dirty Deal. And I recommend the reading. It's really interesting reading. It's at consumerwatchdog.org. It goes into Wetch. Wetch is one of the more powerful lobbyists in Sacramento.
Scott Wetch.
Scott Wetch, one of the more powerful lobbyists in Sacramento. And he's represented the IBEW, the International Brotherhood of Electric Workers, for a long time. But he's also represented, a lot of people don't know this, some of the utilities. he worked for, and it's not on the lobbying record, but we caught payments to him from Sempra's subsidiary, SoCal Gas, and he did a lot of like pretty much black bag work for SoCal Gas. Created this fake not-for-profit for it. He is an interesting character. Also, these AI data centers that are cropping up everywhere, they're absorbing huge amounts of electricity. Yeah. They're all being staffed by IBEW electricians. They're all union electricians, so it's a huge boon for the electric job. So they want this power. They don't care if it's dirty or clean or what it costs. They just want it. So that's what Swetches did. And then we actually looked at his wealth, because he's a worker union guy. You would think he wouldn't be so conspicuous about his consumption. But he was on a Fox reality TV show about buying homes in Maui, where he bought a $4 million Maui home, one of his 3 homes, in a real estate portfolio worth $12 million. He's a utility worker lobbyist, and he was behind 3 times on his utility bills and had 3 liens against him for not paying his utility bills. So he's...
The irony. That's
yeah,
irony.
Yeah, yeah.
The irony right there.
We dropped the report just to show that he's got some hypocrisy going on.
I know Cailey has a couple of questions for you, and I know we really want to start talking about rooftop solar at some point, but I do want to ask you just one other
Since
question.
it is a rooftop solar podcast, yeah.
Yes, but we do care about the high cost of electricity.
Mm-hmm.
That's why people go solar to
Yeah,
begin with.
exactly.
And we've done a lot of work. And so I just have a question about this so-called pathways bill that you're talking about. And it strikes me that one reason why this pathways proposal is a bad one, to hand over control of electricity markets to a regional authority, is just that the reason why rates are so high is because state regulators have failed to control utility spending, which would argue that we need more scrutiny at a local level on utility spending, on things like transmission and distribution, not less. And this pathways thing, no matter who's the president, is basically handing over authority to people that are less accountable to California voters, less accountable to California consumers. Would you agree with that take, that essentially it's just going in the wrong direction? We need more accountability, not less, and this is creating less accountability.
Yeah, fundamentally that's what it's about, but it's also about like prioritizing dirty energy over clean energy like sun. It's also about price. And what that means is when they want to build transmission lines to bring electricity from Wyoming to California, well, you know what? Who's going to pay for it? We're going to pay for it. And so you add more and more layers, and the price for ratepayers just keeps going up. And then when you add in the data center needs, the subsidies are going to go on to the consumers to build the lines that the data centers are going to use. It will not be cheaper, because the more infrastructure, the more ratepayers pay. And we're already paying too much. So I totally agree with you, Dave.
And isn't it right, Jamie, like put another way, the more that the utilities spend on all this infrastructure, the more money they make, the higher our rates go. So when you have something like this bill, this just enables the utilities to spend and spend and spend exactly the way they want to get more and more and more profits. And all of that gets passed through to us, the ratepayers. And then you have the legislature and the utilities scapegoating rooftop solar to get away from it, to basically cover their butts as they are screwing over the ratepayers to make as much money as they possibly can.
Yeah, I mean, I really don't even understand the scapegoating, but they clearly are. They claim there's a cost shift. They claim that if you take people off the grid with rooftop solar, somehow it's costing other people who are on the grid more, which makes no sense, because if you're taking people off the grid, they're not using power.
Right.
I mean,
right.
And also, a lot of the people who have rooftop solar are like middle income to some lower middle income people. It's not all rich people.
Oh, yeah.
Not only that, the fact that she was like an executive at SoCal Edison, and she's carrying a bill that kills rooftop solar, which is the utility's number one priority. Yes. It's just so outrageous. I mean, it's the most natural source of energy. It's the cheapest source, and they don't want it because they can't make money off of it. And so that self-interest is like, it's so obvious to me. It's just this cross-pollination, this revolving door that breeds unbelievable corruption. They're all friends. They go to the same parties. They know each other, and PG&E is like the little piggy bank that they're going to pull on when they're not in office, and that's why they can't appropriately regulate them.
Yeah, this term cross-pollination, that's the first time I've heard somebody refer to it like that. That's a great term, because by our count, it's about $1 billion that the utilities have given over the past 20 years to academics, nonprofits, businesses, and just tons of sitting legislators. We have a resource on our website for folks who are interested where you can go and type in the name of your legislator and find out how much money the utilities have given them over the years. So,
And it's
that's
our
exactly
money
right.
that they're giving them.
It's our money, right?
That's the worst thing.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. Well, Jamie, I know one thing that we really, admire about Consumer Watchdog is that you really have put the consumer at the center, at the focus point, as opposed to the government or the bureaucrats. And a lot of your successes, I think, have come out of that model. And so I'm just curious to know, we've talked a lot about what the challenges are, what the obstacles are, but you've also had some really incredible successes, and I'd love to hear about, one or two of those and how you did it. How do you succeed when you're fighting against this like huge, just monolith cross-pollinating everywhere? How does that then happen?
Well, in California, we fortunately have the initiative process. This has leveraged a lot of change. I mean, we would not have been able to regulate the insurance companies if we didn't have Prop 103 on the ballot. We would not have been able to get a lot of stuff done in the last couple of years, honestly, without the threat of a ballot measure. We had a threat of a privacy measure that got the strongest privacy protections in America. The ballot measure has been a way to break open change in Sacramento, which is why I'm interested that there hasn't been a ballot measure to do this on utilities, and I'm looking forward to that ballot measure when it comes. So that's the way we've done it, is with the power from the outside of the ballot measure, but also the power of the media, which unfortunately is dwindling. There's less and less media. There's less and less focus on attention, a lot of atomization. But over the years, a good expose on the front page of the LA Times or the New York Times has changed things. And when you have a populist issue like electricity prices, you can change things. And so between the ballot measure and the media and the courts, we've done okay.
Yeah, I think we can relate to that. I mean, one thing I'm taking away from what you're saying is that, nothing is easy, but having the voters on your side and actually leveraging the power of voters and everyday people, and partly doing that through the media, just getting the information out to people so that they have it, giving them ways that they can take action, ideally through a way they can just vote on a law themselves through the ballot, it's the path, even if, it's hard. And it's
hard, and there's a lot of subtleties along the way, and the trick is like not making like mistakes along the way. I find that in every campaign I've ever been involved in, it's always my opponent's mistakes that turn the tide.
What is your vision for putting the consumer at the center of California's electricity system?
Well, first of all, we got to clean up the revolving door. We got to say anyone who serves as a PUC commissioner can never work for a utility, ever. I don't mean 5-6 years, ever.
Hear, hear. Yes.
And we do a lot right there. But beyond that, I think we need to re-envision this rate of return issue. Like if utilities can make 11-12% on everything they do and everything they build, they're going to do more and build more. We have to rein that in. We need to make sure that there are audits, regular audits of how they're spending money. Wildfire prevention and transmission building are the two biggest drivers of rates. And they're wasting a lot of money on wildfire prevention. They're putting fire retardant, poles in places that there's no wildfire risk because it makes the money when they do that. We got to have audits. We got to make sure they're not wasting the money. And the same thing on the transmission lines. We shouldn't be building transmission lines when we don't need to. Those are the key cost drivers. But fundamentally, on a day-to-day, just making it work better, we need a PUC that's clean of the conflicts of interest. So it's a lot of decisions. There's a lot of power in that PUC, and and it's like endemic corruption. Even the groups who are trying to prevent the rate hikes get sucked in as well because they're part of the establishment, and they have to play ball a little with the utilities and the PUC if they want to get paid. There's a lot of cases going on all the time. There's a lot of money being made by all sorts of parties. And there are a lot of settlements being made that aren't necessarily in the interest of ratepayers because so many people are making so much money off this thing. And we need to clean that up.
Well, I think you won't be surprised to hear that we agree with virtually every solution that you've just laid out. And it probably won't surprise you either to hear that, we would add to that list that the state ought to just fully unleash the power of rooftop solar and batteries as well, and just really full on encourage everyone everywhere to be putting solar panels on their roof as a way to reduce the need to have to spend money on transmission and distribution and the things that are driving up our rates so much.
I mean, if we all had a solar panel, we would not need the utilities. We certainly wouldn't need these high rates, but that's why they want to kill solar. I'm surprised, a lot of the people who claim they're allied with consumers in the Capitol because they want to lower the bills are ignoring some of the bigger solutions. They're riding the idea of affordability, but they're not going after the big solutions.
That's, I think, the task ahead of us. Obviously, the public is fed up. Even a lot of the legislature is fed up. But also, many people in the legislature take a lot of money from the utilities. They take a lot of money from the utilities labor unions. So you can see a lot of legislators going, how do I try to actually solve the problem without making the utilities and the union mad too much? And I think it's our job to kind of go, no. It's the question should just be, how do I solve the problem? I don't care who I make mad as long as I'm helping the consumer. So I do feel like that's the opportunity here. We're almost out of time, and so I just want to ask you, is there anything else that you want to say here and tell people about?
No, I think you guys are doing great work. Just keep it up. We need you.
All right, well, back at you. We think you're doing great work. We're really, really glad, Jamie Court from Consumer Watchdog, President of Consumer Watchdog, that you came on the show to talk to our listeners about all the goings-on in California. And we hope to have you back another time.
Looking forward to it. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Jamie. Bye.
Take care.
Now's the time for Solar Heroes, where we give an awesome shout out to a Solar Rights Alliance member. So, Dave, who is our solar hero for this episode?
Our solar hero for this episode is Yvette, who has done everything from testifying at the state capitol to dancing in a sun costume on Earth Day to raise awareness about PG&E's attacks on rooftop solar customers, to speaking with the media. Yvette has done a ton of stuff.
Yeah, and it even goes beyond that stuff too, because she's done a lot of behind the scenes work as well to build more than one massive coalition and help get the word out to more solar users across the state with some really ingenious strategy ideas that we've been able to implement over the years. And so whether she's right in the spotlight or totally backstage, she's such a joy to work with, and she makes a huge difference.
Totally. I love Yvette's strategy when she comes up with stuff, and she's helped us raise money. She's gotten items from bikes to books donated that we can raise money for the cause. We love working with Yvette. Thank you, Yvette, for everything that you do.
Thank you so much.
All right. Well, let's check in with our action team. Cailey, what's going on in the Solar Rights Action Center?
Well, over here in the Solar Rights Action Center, we're here to report on the fact that AB 942 took a hit, but it's not dead yet. And if we want to kill this bill, then we need to stop it before it continues to advance further and further through committee and committee. So if you haven't yet, please head over to don'tbreakthecontract-action. That's solarrights.org/don'tbreakthecontract-action. It's on the screen right now. And please take the actions there to inform your legislators about the amended version of AB 942 and ask them to oppose this terrible bill that will harm consumers and enrich the monopoly utilities. And if you have already called your legislator on this topic, please do so again. Please make sure that they understand that this amended version of AB 942 will still break rooftop solar contracts. It will still harm consumers. And we want to make very sure that their position is rock solid no on AB 942 as amended.
Yeah, that's right. And some people have reported to us that their legislators are responding, claiming that the bill doesn't break the contract or claiming that the bill protects rooftop solar owners. They're obviously not telling the truth. And we encourage you, if you get a response like that from your legislator, to push back politely, but firmly, and set the record straight. Send them a copy of the contract. If you don't have your copy anymore, we've got a copy that you can send them. So hit us up and you can send it over to them and show them, just like Cailey did earlier, what part of the contract this bill is breaking. If they claim to you that this doesn't This is going to help consumers, set them straight on that. And we can help you do that. So if you need more information, you should contact us at info@solarrights.org, and we can help you with that correspondence with your lawmakers. But the goal is you should be working to make sure your legislator understands that this bill is terrible. It breaks contracts, it harms consumers, and there is no way to make it better. It just needs to be defeated, and defeated quickly.
That's right. And just a reminder, folks, that as constituents, you should be your legislators' first priority. You have every right to ask them to stop a bad bill that is going to harm you and thousands of other people in your district and 2 million people statewide. Your actions have made a difference up to this point. This bill has been weakened, but it has not been stopped. So if we want to stop this terrible bill and Newsom's terrible proposal to break these rooftop solar contracts, you need to make sure your legislators know that they've got to vote no on AB 942, even as amended. And remember, you are your own best advocate.
What a great show. Thank you for joining us today.
And thank you, everyone, for all the effort that you're putting in to stop this terrible bill, AB 942, that will harm consumers while enriching the monopoly utilities. Keep it up, everybody.
Yes, please keep it up. And again, thanks for tuning in to the Solar Rights Alliance podcast, where we put the power back in your hands and give you the tools to defend the freedom and independence of rooftop solar. Bye for now.
Bye, folks.